Alright, video number 2, the study guide. Question number 1. How did the Great Compromise satisfy the large states? I feel like I'm repeating myself, but if it helps, so be it. Alright, so the large states, like Virginia, like the Virginia Plan. So they wanted to have population in the legislative branch based on population so that they'd have more representatives. But the smaller states weren't going to go for that. So what they wanted is they wanted to, again, for population. So Roger Sherman says, okay, fine, we'll use your idea and we'll create the House of Representatives. And to this day, it's still the same way. The more people you have in your state, the more representatives you have in the House of Representatives, which California has the largest, as you know, 55. Number 2, why did the Anti-Federalists oppose the new Constitution? Because it didn't have a Bill of Rights, and they were afraid it would give too much power to the national government. That's it. Number 3, what issues did the Constitutional Convention resolve? So, 1, it resolved the idea of how we would determine representation in the legislative branch, how many representatives from each state would get to go and represent their state in the federal government. It resolved whether or not we could count slaves as part of the population with the 3/5 compromise. It resolved whether or not we would have one branch or 2 or 3, so it ended up giving 3 branches of government. And it resolved the idea of how we could deal with federal government versus state government. This is called federalism, and we'll talk about this more in the next unit. Number 4, what were the Federalist Papers? The Federalist Papers are a series of essays, really, that were written mostly by Hamilton, wrote the majority of them, Madison wrote the other part, and John Jay wrote a few of them. And they were basically a way, kind of like propaganda in a sense, to try to convince the states to ratify the Constitution. Because after the convention, they printed up a copy of the Constitution, sent it to all the states. Each state was going to have a ratifying convention to determine whether that state would ratify the Constitution as it was, or did they need to change some things. And 9 of the 13 states had to ratify it. So in order to get more states as quickly as they could, Madison, Jay, and Hamilton wrote these essays. It's amazing how many they wrote, and how, with a feather, really, and so quickly and so eloquently. They're some of the best literature, supposedly, out there. So, all right, number 5. What important ideal did all states include in their state constitutions? Bill of Rights, a Declaration of Rights. They listed the rights. Number 6. How did the Great Compromise resolve the debate over state representation in the federal government? Great Compromise, remember, came up with a bicameral legislature. So the Virginia plan to have larger states have more representatives becomes the House of Representatives, where population is what determines how many representatives you get. The idea of the New Jersey plan, which the small states liked, becomes the idea of the Senate, so everyone's equal. There are 2 senators in every house, even to this day. It doesn't matter how many people are in your state. You could have 2 people in your state or 200,000 people. Doesn't matter. You each get 2. 7, a quote by Thomas Jefferson, which is going to be something along the lines that we had from Shays' Rebellion. I'm not 100%, I can't really remember, but it's something like the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and something. Anyway, look that up. It's and read what you wrote about it and what I talked about. So that's going to be on there. Got to understand it. Number 8. What do we call the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? The Bill of Rights. Easy. Number 9. List 3 weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. I'll give you a whole bunch. 1, there's no executive branch. 2, there's no judicial branch. 3, the federal government has all the power. 4, the states, no, take that back, the federal government has no power, the states have all the power. And that being the case, that the federal government cannot collect taxes, the federal government cannot regulate interstate trade, the federal government cannot settle disputes between the states, the federal government can print money, but so can the states, and everybody's got their different money. This is a disaster. Number 10, define democracy. Democracy means the people have the power, ultimately. And so in our case, the people have the power by voting. We are not a pure democracy. We're not a direct democracy. Our country is a representative democracy, or republic, or a representative, I already said that, representative democracy. Republicanism, representative, yeah. Number 11, what document was created during the Constitutional Convention? Really? Do I have to ask? The Constitution. Number 12, describe the effects of Shays' Rebellion. Well, Shays' Rebellion proves that the Articles of Confederation are a failure, and our country cannot exist with such a weak federal government, because the federal government couldn't go in and put down Shays' Rebellion. So we call, mostly it's Hamilton, pushing to have a constitutional convention, and they meet in Philadelphia and decide on a new constitution. And all that comes about because Shays' Rebellion was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Number 13, what did the 3/5 compromise resolve? It resolved the conflict between between the northern and southern states. And so they were saying that the Southerners wanted to count slaves in their population, and the Northerners said no, so they compromised on counting some of them. They count, for every 5 slaves, they count as 3 citizens for the House of Representatives. Number 14, define civic virtue. It just means putting the good of your community before the good of yourself. Think George Washington. Yeah, he just wanted to go home, and he didn't. 15, why did the national government, why was it given such few powers under the Articles? Because they're afraid of a strong central government. They just fought a war to get rid of a dictator, so they thought, or a tyrant. They don't want another one, so they don't give any power to the federal government, and they don't have an executive under the Articles, which we know fail. 16, to ratify means to officially approve, so they wanted to ratify the Constitution. 17, what is a representative government? When we vote for people who then represent us in, like in our case, Washington, D.C. So I don't go to Washington, D.C. and vote myself. I choose someone who then goes and votes for me. It's supposed to be representing me. It's supposed to be speaking with what I want. 18, many compromises were made in regards to representation, slave trade, taxation, and electing the president. What do you call the meeting that addressed and resolved these issues? Constitutional Convention. 19. Why did the delegates create a bicameral legislature? I keep asking the same questions, don't we? Because you have the Virginia plan, and they have the New Jersey plan, and they can't agree, and they're fighting, and so Roger Sherman says, large states, you get the House of Representatives. Small states, you get the Senate, and it resolves all the issues. 19. Why did the delegates create a... Oh, I already said that. 20. Why were the Articles of Confederation a failure as our first constitution? Because they didn't give the federal government enough power. I've said that at least 5 times. So, there you go. Hope this helps. Bye.